meeting that I had with the mayor.
There's great dispute on that coming across the board.
Yes, I wrote the email, and I know what I said, and if we could take the time to take a moment to talk about that, I think we could clear that up.
I'm not sure we could. Mr. Del Toro certainly has a different recollection of it, as well as responses to him. And I had the opportunity to talk with him in Flint this Saturday as well. Very different from what we're being told here. And that's the concern. Again, the Human Decency Act. When the issue was brought to you by authorities in the field, by actual testing, the EPA didn't do what it needed to do, even if the other entities going down to the local level and the state level weren't doing their duty, and we are certainly going to ask them about those issues. And I look forward to their responses as well. Mr. Chairman, I see my time is expired. I yield back, and hopefully I can gain some other time from other individuals down the road.
I thank the gentleman, Mr. Wahlberg. We now recognize the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes.
The Flint drinking water crisis is a national scandal, and it cries out for accountability from those that are responsible. And that is what we are trying to accomplish today. I would like to begin with Mayor Walling. Mayor Walling, in Mr. Early's statement for this committee, he made several statements that specifically concern the involvement of yourself and the City Council in the decision to switch to the Flint water. First, Mr. Early alleges, and I quote, "The concept of using the Flint River as an interim water source was inherent in the City Council's KWA Water Authority vote and Kurtz's March 2013 order," end quote. So Mayor Walling, at any time did the City Council ever vote on using the Flint River as an interim source of water?
No.
Now, Mr. Early never says that the City Council voted on this issue. Rather, he very clearly implies that somehow their vote to join the KWA Water Authority meant that they approved the use of the Flint River as an interim source. So Mayor Walling, in your prepared statement today before the committee, I quote, "The decision in June of 2013 to switch to the Flint River was contrary to the water plans and financial forecasts provided to me and the Flint City Council in March of 2013, end quote. I am going to put on the screen a document entitled Original Projection Summary Comparison, the KWA and DWSD K Water Authority to the Detroit Water Authority. And what's notable to me when you see this is a seamless movement. Never does this document mention the taking of water from the Flint River. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
That's correct.
And this was what was put before the City Council, is that correct?
That's right. That was March 2013.
And if I were a member of that City Council, I would think that was a seamless movement and that the Flint River was never touched and that the KWA and Detroit water would be what was there. Is that your interpretation of it?
That was what was provided in the documents. That's what took place in the City Council meeting, the comments that I and others made.
Now, Mr. Early also alleges that he, quote, delegated all day-to-day operational responsibilities of the Department of Planning and Development and the Department of Public Works to Mayor Walling as of June 2014, which notably is after after the switchover. So Mayor Walling, it appears to me that Mr. Early is attempting to deflect blame for this crisis onto you and to the City Council of Flint. What's your response to that?
I was surprised when this statement was first made. It was made through an op-ed, I believe, in October of 2015. And first of all, Mr. Early at the time was serving as city manager in the city of Saginaw. He was not serving in the city of Flint. I was, and I know what happened and what the process was. The first frequently asked questions that the city of Flint provided in early February of 2015, when so many of the issues came out about the TTHM crisis, was that the finance director and the city's public works director provided that recommendation to EFM Kurtz in June of 2013.
So in reality, to cut to the chase of it, who actually made the major decisions related to the water issues in Flint? Who made those decisions?
They were put in place by Emergency Financial Manager Kurtz in June of 2013. That included an adopted 2-year budget that set the equipment and purchasing and personnel for the Department of Public Works for the next 2 years. That's what Mr. Early later inherited.
And Mayor Walling, my time is up, but just would Mr. Farley have had the power, would Mr. Early have had the power to keep clean Detroit water flowing if he wanted to?
Yes, the emergency managers often amended the budgets that they were working with in consultation with the state.
And they had that power, not the city council.
Thank the gentlewoman. Now recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Amash, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panel for being here. Thank you especially to Professor Edwards, who's been an extremely valuable expert in this area. And I share your concerns about the EPA and its role and Ms. Hedman's role in this, and Mr. Wahlberg made many important points in that regard. I'm going to ask some questions to Mr. Early. Mr. Early, you wrote a column for the Detroit News in October 2015, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter this op-ed into the record.
Without objections to order.
You've made clear here today and in your column that the decision to switch over to the Flint River was made by the previous emergency manager and the city council, correct?
That is correct.
In your op-ed, you say it fell to me to oversee the implementation, correct?
That is correct.
Now, also in your op-ed it says, it did not fall to me to question, second guess, or invalidate the actions taken prior to my appointment. Do you really believe that?
I believe that based on the fact that there was no petition, there was no effort made to engage me to change what had already been implemented.
So, I'm sorry, so you believe as an emergency manager, as someone who's put in charge of the city of Flint, it doesn't fall on you to question, second guess, or invalidate any actions taken prior to your appointment?
No, what I mean by that is that it does not fall to me to arbitrarily change that, and that's what I was referring to.
Is it the job of a city manager to question things? Mm-hmm. Isn't that why you're brought in?
That's part of the reason, yes.
If as a congressman, if I took the position that it's not my job to question, second guess, or invalidate any actions that happened prior to my being here, would I be doing my job?
Well, if everybody were telling you that the project was on course and everything was going well, so there was nothing to second guess.
So if Congress passes something in a previous term and I get elected, I'm just supposed to say, oh, well, everything's okay. I don't have any work here. Is that right?
What I'm saying is that you would obviously have to do your own due diligence, but if it comes up that there's nothing to change, there's nothing to change. And if people are telling you that the project is on course, keep in mind, that was only one of many projects in a distressed community that the emergency manager was responsible for.
So in your op-ed, you also say, at the time the decision was made, there was no way to predict such an unfortunate outcome. You also call it an unintended consequence with no blame to affix. So, as a person appointed in this position, or as an elected official like me, are we not supposed to concern ourselves with unintended consequences? We're just not supposed to think about those things?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that because of those unintended consequences, we now have what is known as the Flint water crisis. In hindsight, there's probably a lot more that everyone would have done, a lot more questioning everyone would have done. But when you have an 18-month window to turn around a distressed community going through its second round of state intervention, the object is to get the work done and enlist as many people as you can to assist you in getting that work done.
Isn't it your job to think about unintended consequences?
Well, we always think about the possibility of hypotheticals, absolutely.
And do you feel you did that in this case?
Well, I believe based on the information we were given, we acted responsibly and did what we did knowing the information we had at the time. Yes, sir.
All right, according to Michigan's emergency manager law, quote, upon appointment, an emergency manager shall act for and in the place and stead of the governing body and the office of chief administrative officer of the local government. Additionally, the emergency manager shall have broad powers to assure the local government's capacity to provide or cause to be provided as necessary governmental services essential to the public health, safety, and welfare. What, in your view, is the emergency manager's role in overseeing the daily duties of city employees?
Well, as I said earlier in my comments, as a city manager, I've always involved the elected and the appointed officials in the work that I do. And I did no different as the emergency manager in involving them because they're the experts. They're the ones that handle the day-to-day operations. So they were very much involved.
So when a city has an emergency manager, who's responsible for ensuring compliance with state and federal laws regarding safe drinking water?
Well, regarding anything, the emergency manager obviously is the person responsible for making sure that those things get done, and I've always accepted that.
So you take responsibility for that? Because in your op-ed, you say, the headline is, don't blame EM for Flint water disaster.
I'm trying to draw a distinction between responsibility and blame, sir. And we were all responsible by virtue of our roles. I was very responsible in my role as a
What role did you have and what steps did you take in ensuring the Flint water treatment plant was prepared to meet state and federal drinking water standards, knowing that the Flint River would be the primary water source?
Well, we had regular meetings on the progress for upgrading the plant. As we got up to the switching over to the Flint water, I had regular meetings with the treatment staff. The mayor was a part of some regular meetings that we had. We all had discussions about the progress and the things that were being encountered in this switch. Once we made the switch and we got the complaints about the quality of the water, we went to the DEQ. We got boil water advisories, which are common in the case of treating water. We had meetings on a couple of occasions with the MDEQ to talk about what's going on and what is actually being treated. And let me again state for the record, in none of those meetings were the current issues that we're dealing with now a problem. They were not addressed. They were not issues brought to our attention. But we did everything we could to make sure we were being responsible to the complaints and the concerns about the quality of the water.
Yeah, I think responsibility involves paying attention to unintended consequences, thinking about what might happen. I see my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, for 5 minutes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Edwards talked about willful blindness. I want to warn everybody about the willful blindness that's built into the separation of powers system, and that is why finger pointing of the federal and the state side, either on this committee or among our witnesses, is quite inappropriate. Now, this committee has recognized this. To its credit, this committee passed in February, this past February, a bill, actually passed a law that requires the EPA to notify residents of high levels of lead when water samples show lead levels for the highest 10% of homes tested are above 15 parts per billion. Why do you think we needed a law? Because there is unusual deference on the part of federal officials. And apparently it took a law to say when people's lives are in danger, when their health is in danger, there's an obligation to speak up when the state isn't doing its part. Mr. Del Toro did speak up to his supervisors, but he risked being a whistleblower, and we know what happens to whistleblowers in our system. So my questions aren't aimed at finger pointing. It is clear, though, that once you have the slightest evidence of lead in the water wherever you are in the system, you better speak up, because this is irreversible. You can't turn this one around, people. So I have a question for Mr. Early, recognizing the federal responsibility as well as the state responsibility, sir. But let's speak to your responsibility. You know, people are not crazy. They began to smell odors in the water. They saw the color of the Flint water change. And that started a month after the water plant began processing, during your watch, sir, the Flint water. Now, they began to speak out. They complained even about skin rashes and hair loss. Those complaints, it is our information, continued for 8 months while you were emergency manager of Flint. Did you ever consider, given those complaints, switching back to Detroit water once the public started to sicken and to speak out?
Well, let me just make again very clear that the fact of the complaints, we responded to those. We sent our water staff out and collected samples. But keep in mind, we were also working very closely with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality on these issues. And while the water did have some discoloration, we were told a number of reasons for that, none of which raised the fact that the water was not fit for human consumption. We relied on the information we received from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, as this was a manageable issue. And we did what we would do.
Yeah, Mr. Early, you have extraordinary powers as an emergency manager. Was money ever a concern, or enough of a concern for you to ask the governor for state funds to reconnect to the Detroit water system during your time, during your watch?
Again, we were trying to manage the issue. And
the smell of the water and the constant complaints were not enough of a warning for you to try to do something beyond rely on the experts. I mean, the experts seem to have been, Mr. Early, in the public, drinking the water.
Well, we relied on the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and we got the information from them. And
all right, Mr. Early, I'm sorry, my time is limited. Sue McCormick of Detroit Water wrote to you offering to continue supplying water to Flint, Michigan, until the Water Authority's project was complete. But you wrote back, there will be no need for Flint to continue purchasing water to serve its residents and businesses after April 17th, 2014. Why did you reject this offer to continue using Detroit water as a source?
Just to be clear, the letters you referred to went to the city clerk at the time.
You had no knowledge of this letter?
I was not the emergency manager at the time that the letter came in. By the time I got there, we had already been notified that the contract had been terminated. What we could still...
But you were the emergency manager before the switch was implemented on your watch. Mm-hmm. You could say, wait a minute, I'm in charge now. Wasn't this your job to look at what should be done now that you are in charge, sir?
We did look at that, and again, we followed the guidelines based on the information we were given. But importantly in that letter is that...
What about the warning that came? Now, imagine receiving a warning from somebody in the line who says, I have people above me making plans to distribute water as soon as possible. I'm reluctant to go, was reluctant to go before, but after looking at the monitoring schedule and current staffing, I do not anticipate giving the okay to begin sending this water out anytime. If any water is distributed from this plant in the next couple of weeks, it will be against my direction. What more did you need, Mr. Early?
That did not go to me, ma'am. That did not go to me. That email went to the director of the department, I do believe. It did not go to me.
Your name is on the letter, Mr. Early.
Oh, is that the one from you're talking two different things.
And what's the other thing, sir?
Well, the letter from the MDEQ